Hey kid, do you have questionable morals and want to make some money fast? Are you drowning in medical debt because you live in Freedom Land and just want an easy way out? Well, I've got the business opportunity for you. Drug dealing. Yup, all you need is an unlicensed RV, some basic chemistry knowledge, and a sidekick who sounds like every boomer's idea of a teenager, and you'll be on your way to a multi-million-dollar empire. Now these days, you do run into the small, tiny problem of drugs being illegal, but that wouldn't be an issue in the past. Back in the good old days, we didn't exactly know or care about the negative consequences of hard drugs, and so they ended up being sold in a lot of different ways for a lot of different purposes without any restrictions. So without further ado, let's talk about the deadliest drugs that were completely legal. The first drug on our list is cocaine. Now cocaine is naturally found in the leaves of the coca plant, and it was first used by the Incans for religious and medicinal purposes. Then the Spanish showed up, and they noticed that the workers were a lot more productive when they consumed these leaves. Now of course, the workers were actually just getting high off of cocaine, but we didn't know that at the time, so this was just an all-natural way for the Spanish to squeeze just a little more profit from their conquests. The leaves eventually made their way into Europe and took off. Powdered cocaine was first made in 1880, and some research on this new chemical found that it had some interesting properties as an anesthetic and a stimulant. Plus, the powdered form made it much easier to consume. Sigmund Freud, a neurologist from Austria, wrote an article about cocaine in which he claimed that it made you feel euphoria, self-control, made you work more, and apparently, after taking cocaine, it is soon hard to believe that you are under the influence of any drug. Because of course, cocaine addicts are always considered the pinnacle of normal human behavior. He also wrote that there were no harmful side effects, and the user felt no urges to do more cocaine after taking it once. He also mentioned that there was apparently no lethal dose for cocaine, and people could just take as much as they wanted to. So this was basically a drug that made you feel better, made you more efficient, had no negative side effects, and no risk of addiction. In short, it was a miracle product. And you know what happens when there's a new miracle product. Cocaine was quickly being sold at every neighborhood drugstore in a form of powder, pills, cigarettes, and much more. It was claimed to make you more alert, efficient, reduce hunger, remove dandruff, make your hair grow better. Where the fuck is this going? A chemist in France decided to make wine that had cocaine in it, and this became extremely popular, with famous celebrities everywhere endorsing the product. Even the Pope himself gave the wine an official Vatican medal for its beneficiary effects. Cocaine also took off after the original recipe for Coca-Cola included coca leaves as an ingredient. It was also used by some actual doctors as an anesthetic during surgeries. At the time, pretty much everyone was consuming some form of drink containing cocaine, and this certainly wasn't helped by the hordes of celebrities who were endorsing these products. Companies were eager to sell the drug in any way possible. But like a lot of other things published by Sigmund Freud, his article about cocaine was completely wrong. Cocaine did have negative side effects. It was in fact highly addictive, and it definitely had a lethal dose. Freud was regularly using cocaine himself for a long while at this point, so probably should have taken his opinion with a grain of salt. But cocaine had become a sort of celebrity drug, used by famous actors and inventors and pretty much anyone else who could afford the hospital bills for the side effects. And there were a lot of side effects. You fucked up your lungs from smoking it, your nose from snorting it, and that lethal dose was pretty easy to achieve with cocaine being available everywhere you look, and sometimes even prescribed by employers to their workers so that they would work more. Deaths from cocaine use started increasing a lot after these glowing recommendations. Remember those doctors who used cocaine as an anesthetic? Well, they eventually stopped doing that because of the large number of accidental overdoses during surgeries. As the years passed, these negative effects started becoming more and more apparent. Unsurprisingly enough, it took a lot more than clever marketing to hide the pile of bodies now building up from cocaine overdoses. In 1903, Coca-Cola removed cocaine from its recipe, and in 1920, the US government made the drug illegal. Now the next drug on our list also has natural origins, and as we all know, if it's natural, this must be good for you. Introducing meth. Best known for being America's favorite way to pay for life-saving surgeries, meth is pretty well known, both for its popularity and for its deadliness. Meth comes from a plant called ephedra, which is being used in Chinese traditional medicine for over 5,000 years. You know, all of our religions and folklore suddenly make a lot more sense now that we know that ancient people were just zoink the fuck out 24/7. In 1885, a Japanese scientist identified the active ingredient in ephedra, and 3 decades later, another scientist managed to make the crystallized form of the drug, making the world's first crystal meth. As soon as this new form of drug was found, people immediately decided to put it to medical use. Meth is a stimulant, and so researchers looked into using it as a treatment for depression, which is kinda like getting rid of a toothache by shooting yourself in the face. The first commercial use of meth came in the form of Benzedrine. This was an inhaler that was supposed to cure a blocked nose. It was completely free to buy without a prescription though, so people quickly found out alternative uses that were a lot less medical. But meth really took off during World War II. If you're fuzzy about what happened back then, there was a certain German guy with certain interesting ideas that he very strongly believed in. One thing led to another, and now he's committing one of the worst war crimes in recorded history and trying to take over the world. And you don't pull off a grand plan like that without at least a little involvement from some grade A drugs. Meth was first introduced to Germany in the form of Pervitin. This was an early version of crystal meth inspired by benzodrine that was brought to the German market and immediately took off. It was claimed to make you more alert and productive. And of course, you could freely buy it from pharmacies without a prescription. A bit of marketing magic later, and Pervitin became Germany's drug of choice. During this time, it also caught the attention of a certain army director. You see, during the war, the Germans could spend as much money as they wanted on new tanks and planes, making them as fast and powerful as possible. But at the end of the day, the weakest link would always be humans. We need food, we get tired, we need sleep, and you don't have time to do all that when you're trying to establish a genocidal empire. The solution? Pump your soldiers up with a shit ton of meth and send them off to battle. Germany started prescribing its soldiers with Pervitin, and this allowed them to work days on end without getting tired or sleeping. In fact, Germany's entire military strategy back then was dependent on their soldiers just going at it without stopping, almost like machines. They produced millions upon millions of these tablets, and pretty much everyone in the German army was popping these pills 24/7. Now, it wasn't like the negative effects of constantly being on meth weren't known. Doctors across Germany tried to warn the government about the dangers of Pervitin, but unsurprisingly, the health and safety of its people wasn't Germany's first priority at the time. And come on, they were having so much fun. What's a couple sleepless nights anyway? The Germans took over large parts of Europe this way, but even they realized that this clearly wasn't sustainable. By 1941, the government finally admitted that, hey, this Pervitin stuff might not be the best for your body. Despite this, the German army still continued to use the drug on its soldiers, and the company supplying it was raking in all the profits. It was only during the 1970s and 80s that Germany finally removed the drug from its military for good. The last and final drug on our list is opium. You probably know it as the more processed form, heroin, and just like the other drugs on our list, it has completely natural origins. Opium comes from the sap of a certain flower called the opium poppy. The flower produces seed capsules, and by making a slit in the capsule, you will be able to get some fresh liquid opium. For research purposes, of course. Now, opium has had a long and storied history spanning thousands of years and several civilizations. It was first used in Mesopotamia in 3400 BC, and it spread all across the world, from China to ancient Greece to Egypt and everywhere in between. It was mainly used recreationally and also in religious events. Through the Silk Road, opium eventually made its way to Europe. Now, when used, opium causes drowsiness and pain relief, and compared to the stuff being used in Europe at the time, it was a godsend. It was put to use to cure cholera, insomnia, tuberculosis, and doctors even gave it to completely healthy patients to optimize the internal equilibrium of the human body. Whatever that meant. Opium was also used for people suffering from mental problems, stuff like psychosis or depression. Now, the thing about opium is that it's highly addictive, and doctors did note that depressed patients who took opium only ended up more depressed after the effects wore off. But despite this small hiccup, opium use continued to spread across Europe and later the US. Pretty much any illness or disorder could be cured by a handful of opium tablets prescribed by pretty much every doctor out there. But remember how opium was really addictive? Well, this free use of the drug, unsurprisingly, led to a lot of new addicts. In the late 19th century, there were around 200,000 opium addicts in the US, and that number was growing. But opium was still being prescribed like there was no tomorrow, which, for some of these patients, there probably wasn't. In fact, some of the doctors even came up with a new disease to explain the addiction, introducing neurasthenia. This was apparently a nervous disorder that you got from your parents that made you more likely to get addicted. So it's not our irresponsible and frivolous use of potent drugs that's made you an addict, it's all your fault. And this certainly wasn't helped by opium's recreational usage. Opium dens were about as common as child labor in 19th century England, and this spread to the US. In fact, opium was such a big deal that England waged 2 whole wars over it against China. It was a miracle product, both in medicine and as a way to get high. But of course, eventually, the negative side effects had to come in and just ruin the fun. The large number of addicts and the deaths led to new laws saying that doctors couldn't just give out one of the strongest and most addictive drugs in the world like candy on Halloween. The sale of opium was also taxed and restricted, and eventually, by the late 1900s, opium was completely banned. Man, those doctors in the past sure were really irresponsible with how they prescribed opium. I'm sure that doesn't happen anymore, right? So yeah, those are some of the deadliest drugs in history that were completely legal. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe, hit the bell, leave a comment, and watch another video by clicking right here. I'll see you guys later.